Welcome back. And in this video, we will be now seeing how we can integrate our clusters, the Kubernetes clusters, mainly the EKS cluster and the EKS Anywhere cluster with our PPDM, PowerProtect Data Manager, so that PowerProtect Data Manager can orchestrate the entire migration with the help of backup and restore, right? Before doing that, a quick summary. We do have the EKS cluster created. We do have the integration through CSI. The SockShop application is already deployed here, and there is a application state that has been created with a demo user, and an order ID has been placed, right? So the application state has some amount of data that can be a reference in terms of validation of a successful migration. We do have a EKS cluster created. The CSI integration is done. The DDV instance is what we created in the last video and integrated it with the PowerProtect Data Manager. Now we are at a point and a juncture where we will now let the PowerProtect Data Manager integrate or talk to the EKS cluster and EKS Anywhere cluster, so that it can orchestrate the whole affair that our end objective through whatever steps. So this integration is required. To do so, PowerProtect Data Manager requires access to these clusters, right? And the ability to perform certain operations on the clusters, right? And for that, we will be creating the required service account and the RBAC here, and the service account and the RBAC here. Now, if I go to the PowerProtect Data Manager, since I told you, right, in the last video, we already have the data domain virtual edition created, and it is basically now available as a storage, for the backup and restore. Now, if I go here, you can download the required, the files actually. If you go to downloads here, you can actually download the Kubernetes definitions for RBAC and things like that, right? So the YAML files to be downloaded actually to create the service account and all that. In my case, I have created it already and stored it on my, the EKSA admin machine here, right? So I can go ahead and directly apply the service account and the RBAC file. As a part of the admin machine creation through our Saga series, these files are already available actually. So if you are following the Saga series, so just take the set of commands and be done with it actually, right? Else you can download the PowerProtect files from here and then use them to actually create the required things here. Now we will go to steps.md. Yeah, and you can see that the next step is to actually take and apply. So I said, right, on the admin machine, I already have this PowerProtect sa.yaml and PowerProtect rbac.yaml. So these are the two files that I will need to ensure that we have the permissions created. So I'm going to take this, copy this set of commands. First so I'm on the session, the Ubuntu session, where my kubectl is targeting my EKS cluster. You can see this, the node is the EKS cluster node, right? And I'm going to paste this particular two commands to create the PowerProtect SA and RBAC. Okay, it does not do anything. It does not install anything except the access requirements are met.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to do the same thing. You can see here in the second Ubuntu session. This is targeting, the kubectl is targeting my on-prem C4 EKSA, which is the EKS Anywhere cluster. I'm going to take these two commands and paste them here also. Okay. Now we do have the prerequisites met for PowerProtect to discover these clusters actually. What do you mean by that? Now let's go back to our PowerProtect data manager. And I'm going to go and let's say I'm going to go and administration and then credentials. Okay. I'm going to add a credential here. Okay. And you can see that the type of credential PPDM can integrate with a variety of sources actually or assets. Here the asset is basically a Kubernetes cluster in this case, right? So I'm going to name this as, let's say, C4 EKS AWS -1. Okay. And it asks me as a credential. If you guys have, I think you understand it more than enough. Kubernetes, can be kind of, worked upon through a service account basis. And I need the token actually for the service account now. So I'm going to go here and get the token for the service account. So I have a set of commands that will retrieve the secret token for me from both the clusters. So let's do it first on the EKS cluster. You can see that once I run this command, I get a secret token, right? I can simply copy this particular token. Okay. And go to my PowerProtect data manager. It's a very simple GUI step of adding a credential first, let's say. I can do this while adding the cluster also, but it's better to kind of upfront define the credential and then. So I'm gonna, now the credential is saved. Okay, C4 EKS AWS1. This is the one that we actually created now. I'm gonna add one more credential. Type will be Kubernetes. And this is for the C4 EKSA V-1, right? This is my EKS Anywhere cluster here. I'm going to take this particular, token retrieval command from here. And now on the session that is actually targeting my EKS Anywhere cluster, I'll take the same command. And again, I get the service token for my EKS Anywhere cluster. Okay, let me nicely copy this. Okay, and paste it here. So now I have two credentials that we created, right? The EKS Anywhere cluster credentials and the EKS cluster credentials, right? Now I'm going to go, you can see here in the infrastructure tab, we have already added data domain as a storage. Now comes the point where we discover our asset sources. So asset sources could be, either a virtualized environment or a containerized environment, in this case, a Kubernetes. Don't mind, I already have a K3 setup running, spare this. We will add in a new cluster here, okay? The new cluster basically will be, let's name this as C4 EKSA 1. The FQDN and the IP for this cluster, I can simply go to my EKS service, and EKS service will give me the endpoint of the API server for that particular cluster. So I go to my EKS cluster, and you can see here the API server endpoint is documented for that particular cluster. I will take this and paste it onto my PowerProtect data manager, which is here. Yeah. You can see that this is the endpoint for this cluster. The port number is 443 in this case, EKS clusters. The host credentials are already populated. You can see here, this is what we just created, right, earlier. Okay. Schedule discovery, some of the advanced options. In the case of EKS particularly, I have to also deploy the root certificate so that my API server is trusted, and AWS will graciously extend that detail through the certificate authority here listed. I'll take this certificate and I'll paste it here. Okay. And I will say verify the certificate. Okay, you can see that my PPDM is able to reach this particular cluster on this IP address in this port with these credentials, and I have, trusted the certificate of that, and then the certificate is verified, and I will save this. Okay, I think I did not copy it fully over. Okay, just a second. Okay, so thanks Raghavendra for highlighting that. It's a oversight at my end. Our cluster name is not C4EKS1. Our cluster name is C4EKS AWS-1.
Yeah.
Right. And the host credentials are this. My bad, sorry about that.
Don't worry about it.
Everything else remains same. I will again verify this. Verified. And I hope I've not done any other mistake. Okay, everything else stays same and save. So now that the asset, so this is called as an asset, right? So what is an asset in this case? It's a cluster. Okay. Now this cluster, which is the EKS cluster, has many things going on inside of that, right? Pods, your sock shop namespace, the default cube system pods and all that. All of that is now, you can see the discovery status is unknown. The last discovery is never. In the backend, a system job would have been fired to discover this particular cluster. So you can see that the initial discovery for the inventory source, C4 EKSA AWS1, is being conducted, right? And while this happens, we will do a similar, or let this complete. It's like a minute or so, and I'll just quickly pause and resume when the initial discovery is completed. What it strives to do is discover all the namespaces and every Kubernetes object that is available, in the cluster, including the metadata which is available with the cluster and all that. Let me see if this is over and we can quickly see this. Okay, so you can see that the initial discovery has been completed. Yeah, and as a part of that, it would have done various things, right? Now, if I go to asset sources, you understand that the asset source of this EKS cluster has been added. The initial discovery has been created, which means that this should have resulted into objects called as assets. Assets are nothing but entities within that, and I have something else also going on from the other cluster, so I can simply filter this by C4 EKS AWS-1. So now you can see that the cluster name is all the objects that are seen here, right? I mean, these are the namespaces which are actually there in this particular cluster, which is my EKS cluster running on public cloud. Okay. And as a part of that, you can also see it has discovered the sock shop namespace. Yeah. And it has also discovered the fact that, it has 6 persistent volumes.
Yeah.
And status for this namespace and every other namespace in this cluster right now is unprotected, right? Which means we have not created a target policy to create a snapshot of this cluster, right? So everything is, and it also discovers all other namespaces. Now it's upon us. What do you want to back up in the cluster? It gives you a very macro and micro level operational, construct to do backup of everything in the cluster. Point is that it's upon us. What do we want to do? Our target right now is this namespace. And this namespace, like I said, will have these resources that need to be backed up, right? So all of that is hidden inside of the namespace, hidden in the sense it's scoped inside of the namespace here. Okay. Now, in order to do so, we'll come back to this particular, how do we protect this and all that. First, let's go back to our asset sources. We will add the second cluster, which is our EKS Anywhere cluster now. Okay. And I hope I don't make this mistake again. For EKSA -V-1. Okay. And in this case, if you recollect, when we were actually creating the IP address, we gave it .13, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so. Yeah.
And if we don't remember it, we can always go back to my vSphere here, and I can see the control plane here.
Yeah.
And I can see, it's
It's 13. Yeah.
So I'm going to take, this is the IP address, which can go on my, PPDM definition. Okay. Now here the port number is going to be 6443. Okay, EKS Anywhere clusters are reachable via 6443. The host credential will be C4 EKSA V1. We created this for the service account token that we retrieved from the EKS Anywhere cluster. right?
Yeah.
And the IP address is there, the port is there, the credentials are there. In this case, I don't have to kind of, install the root certificate. I'll just go ahead and verify it. And you can see there, the verification is done. I will accept the certificate and I will save this. Once I hit save, a similar operation will happen, which means the PPDM will start to now discover, the EKS Anywhere cluster. So let's look at the diagram here. And while that happens, the system job, a backend job would have been triggered. And you can see that the initial discovery for the inventory source C4 EKSA V1 has started, right? So at this stage, if you look at this slide, where we are in terms of the demo execution, we are now, discovered this cluster and this cluster onto PPDM as the assets. Making sense, Raghavendra?
It has absolutely on target.
Now, while this takes some more time, okay, let's see. Okay, it says success. Let it just complete. So the initial discovery has been created for C4 EKSA V1. Same thing. If I go to assets and click on search C4 EKSA -V-1, it will filter out. You can see, I can even see the namespace that is hosting the PowerStore CSI pods, right?
Yeah.
And the EKS connector, since we registered our EKS Anywhere cluster onto AWS and all that. There's a lot going on here. Right now, you can see that, and this is all against this cluster. Yeah. And this is all unprotected. Anyway, we are not going to protect it. The job here is basically to restore, right? We don't have to. This is the target cluster. The source cluster has to be protected and then restored onto the target cluster. You can very clearly see that I don't have any namespace here called a sockshop, simply because we have not deployed sockshop on EKS Anywhere. Now, since this is done, we will now go to protection. Okay, so what's our objective here right now? The objective here is to create the backup. Okay, and that backup basically will be of this particular application state, right? Now, before we can do that, we will go to infrastructure, storage, okay, and the underlying storage here, okay, and I will say manage storage units. I will just add, for a distinction, I will name it as sockshop. Okay, and let's just give it a 13.0 or 18.01 23, just as a quick reference. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's just give it a soft quota limit.
Yeah.
And save it.
Yeah.
And I will target this logical storage unit on the data domain virtual edition when we create the backups as such. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let this happen. So we can see a new storage unit for our data domain virtual edition has been created. So PPDM has the sysadmin access, right, to the data domain. So it's doing all these management tasks through an API basis, actually. Okay. Now, we will, at this stage, we will wrap up this video, and in the next video, we will then start to create and fulfill our main objective, which is to move things from A to B.
Yeah.
Okay. See you in the next video.
See you, Amber.